Darcy, as core-possessed Marcy is known, is our foe for the last half of the third season of Amphibia. We have not seen a lot of her personality, but she seems to be rather wry and sardonic and mocking, blithely dismissing the childish antics of Andreas in Froggy Little Christmas. But what's most interesting to me about Darcy is that she seems to retain some of Marcy's characteristics, such as her love of strategy games. Perhaps Marcy's personality has not been completely overwhelmed by this hive mind. Perhaps it has just been included in this hive mind. And there's still some of Marcy left in Darcy, even if Darcy takes actions and makes comments that Marcy would never consider making. This possibility is far more interesting to me than the traditional possession narrative, and I hope we get a finale that is more interesting than just Anne and Sasha repeatedly calling out, "Marcy, I know you're in there," as they fight Darcy in the Grand Castle of Newtopia. There's nothing wrong with having some of that necessarily, but it could become kind of stale and platitudinous. Delving into what Darcy wants could be interesting. As we know from Andreas's explanations of the core, it is not a single will. Rather, it is an amalgamation of different great minds of Amphibia, as Andreas phrases it. It's possible Darcy could not want only one thing, and perhaps there are different parts of Darcy, different parts of this hive mind, that have different wants and desires. From a larger scale perspective, however, I do think that Darcy's interests mostly align with Andreas's, as Andreas seems to be following the orders of the core. If Andreas wants to take over the world, as it seems like he does, and not just this world, but all worlds, then it is reasonable to assume that this is what the core wants too. But does every voice in the hive mind want that, or to some dissent? We don't know. There's a lot more to be told in this story. We don't even know why the core requires a vessel like Marcy instead of just choosing a random newt and possessing them. And we don't know why the core even needs a vessel at all, instead of just existing in that mechanical, computer-like, Cthulhu-like entity it resided in until its mind was transferred into Marcy. Now, I do not need the show to answer every little question. The broad strokes, Laputa-like scenario they have set up with Newtopia's castle and Andreas and all this advanced technology is good enough for me. I would like to see more about how the box was stolen from Andreas and his relationships with Beryl and the little pink frog. But at a certain point, we have to consider practical necessities. Because Season 3A spent so much of its time on lighthearted adventures, there is not a lot of time left to wrap up all the more dramatic ideas the show has been working with, especially throughout its last couple seasons. The main plot, with Andreas and the core wanting to take over the world, needs to be resolved, and more importantly for me, the fractured relationships between the three girls need to be given a fitting and poignant conclusion that does justice to the complexity of those relationships. I really hope they do not just paper over the conflicts between them, especially in Season 2, and just go, oh, those are just misunderstandings. The three of them will be alright. They can go back to having this friendship as they did before they came to Amphibia. I think that would be a rather cheap way to resolve the conflicts between these three people with three very different experiences, both in their home lives and in Amphibia. Those tensions between them are real and jagged and messy, and they shouldn't be easily papered over. But though I want character-related questions like that addressed, and though I'm kind of afraid they won't be to the extent that I really would like them to be, there are a few other lore things that do need to be addressed, such as the prophecy. Prophecies are hard to work with, and I would advise most people who are writers to avoid writing prophecies. It's very hard to make them work in a way that is dramatically effective. Too often it's either, oh, you need to do what the prophecy says, or, oh, I'm going against the prophecy, in which case the prophecy just looks like banal superstition. There are better ways to do this. Even Harry Potter, a series I have quite a few problems with, does this extremely well, with the whole idea that Voldemort very much makes this prophecy into a real, substantial thing that needs to be dealt with by virtue of his own choices and actions. The Last Jedi and Blade Runner 2049 are also bold, daring statements on this whole chosen heroes idea that I think any writer who is toying with the whole prophecy or chosen one concept should study astutely. I'm not sure if Amphibia is going to go in that more daring direction. Perhaps the prophecy is just a means to an end, a vehicle for driving the conflict in the latter half of Season 3. And that's fine, I guess, but there's still a lot of issues the show needs to think about. The language of what Andreas says in regards to the prophecy is rather strange. He talks about needing to undo the prophecy. The implication, I suppose, being that the prophecy is already fulfilled. But the whole idea of undoing a prophecy is odd linguistically. A prophecy is kind of necessarily in the future. A prophecy that's already happened is just current events, or once you get a little further away from it, history, albeit an image of history that has more of a mystical and spiritual touch to it. But anyway, ignoring those linguistic quabbles, what was the prophecy in the first place? That these three girls are going to end up in Amphibia? What prophecy does that fulfill? Or is the prophecy the decline of the Empire? That happened 1,000 years ago. Did Andreas reverse the prophecy by restoring the Empire and draining the three girls of their powers? If so, that seems unnecessarily convoluted. And I hope that the show manages to resolve the prophecy storyline in a way that does not feel unnecessarily dense and murky and opaque, especially because, as I will keep emphasizing, the show has very little time left, and it should not use that time on needlessly complicated explanations when the main plot and the relationships between the three girls still need resolution. What are the best episodes of this show? To me, they're always the episodes that focus on the messy, tense, fraught bonds between these three. Episodes like Reunion and True Colors and Barrel's Warhammer, or even The Dinner and Battle of the Bands. Even Barrel's Warhammer, which is not an episode about the three girls specifically, I'd still count in this category because Sasha exists in this episode in the shadow of the idea that her friends are doing so well without her, that they're thriving without her, and she feels inadequate because of that. And those feelings of anger and bitterness that derive from that inadequacy are what drive her to make the choices she does throughout the episode. A lot of the conflicts in the show are either easily resolved, like the conflicts between Anne and the Planters, or between Anne and her Earth family, or their typical hero versus villain conflicts that you could find in a lot of fantasy stories, such as Anne and the Frogs and her friends going against Andreas and the Core. What's by far most interesting to me about this show is these relationships and all their awkward, beautiful, tender, hurtful, messy glory. These three love each other, but they still hurt each other because they're flawed people. They do not always understand what the others want, and as much as they genuinely care about each other, they do not always consider that they might have different perspectives. When they come into conflict with each other, there are times when it's because one person is in the wrong, such as Sasha being so controlling over Anne. But even in instances like that, it's not because Sasha is some horrible person. It's because she genuinely wants what's best for Anne, and she's just not always the best about showing that, because she wants that absolute certainty that her relationships with her friends are secure. She does everything in her own power to try and place herself as this grand hero who's always fighting for her friends, and because of this, she doesn't always realize that she's pushing them away. And that's for a scenario where one person is clearly in the right. But a lot of times in the show, one person isn't always in the right, and that's what I really like about the show. Marcy perhaps was in the wrong for not telling her friends what she did and trying to get them to return to Earth, but Anne perhaps is partly in the wrong too for not realizing that Marcy does not want to return to Earth and just assuming that she'd just go along with whatever Anne wants. There aren't easy solutions to that. There aren't easy solutions to problems like that, and I'd really be interested to see how the show tries to handle the differences in opinion and ideals between these three girls, even while reasserting that their friendship, which they all value, is something that can still be preserved. Again, Darcy is Marcy as much as she is the Core, so we should consider what Marcy wants too when we're considering what Darcy wants, and Marcy, it seems like, wants to be close to her friends, but she also wants her friends to understand her position, and I hope a resolution like that is achieved by the end of the show. Anyway, thank you all for watching. If you liked what you saw today, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Donate to my Patreon if you can, and you want to see more videos like this. Keep watching Amphibia. I'm really interested to see what they do in Season 3B of the show. I hope they delve a little further into Darcy and demonstrate what her subjectivity is like. Right now we're still relying on guesswork. I think giving us a little more about Darcy's perspective could be very artistically useful and powerful, and also helpful to us, the fans, to understand Darcy. Anyway, tune in soon for my next analysis. It will be coming soon. Thank y'all again. Adios, comrades.